life is an endless stream of joy and suffering. There are times when we laugh, but there are also times when we cry. Suffering is something that no one wants, but it is present in the life of every human being, from loss, disappointment, to deep pain in the soul. All make us wonder how to escape suffering. More than 2,000 years ago, the Buddha found the answer. He realized that suffering is not random or meaningless, but has a cause. And if there is a cause, there is also a path to liberation. The teachings of the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path are the compass that helps people understand the nature of suffering and the path to overcome it. In this video, we will explore together the Buddha's profound teachings on suffering and liberation, philosophies that are not only for monks, but can also be applied to our daily lives. Life is a series of experiences intertwined with happiness and suffering. But if we look deeply, we will see that suffering always seems to be more present than happiness. We are busy searching for joy, but then that joy quickly fades, leaving an emptiness in our hearts. We hope, then we are disappointed. We love, then we are separated. Even when we achieve what we want, we still fear that one day we will lose it. The Buddha called this the noble truth of suffering, the first truth about life that no one can escape. Being born is suffering. Growing old is suffering. Getting sick is suffering. And dying is suffering. But that's not all. Even when we have everything, our hearts are constantly restless. Unfulfilled desires are suffering. But when we have them, we worry and fear losing them. Understanding the nature of suffering is not to be pessimistic or hopeless, but to see clearly that it is an inevitable part of life. Only when we face it with awareness can we find the way to escape. The Buddha did not teach us to run away from suffering, but to look directly at it, then find the cause and the way to liberation. If suffering is an inevitable truth, then what is the cause that keeps people immersed in suffering? The Buddha taught that suffering does not come about by chance, nor is it imposed by a supreme being. Suffering comes from within our own minds, from the cravings, attachments, and ignorance that we nurture. The root causes of suffering are greed, anger, and delusion, three poisons that cloud our wisdom and drag us into the endless cycle of samsara. When we desire something and cannot obtain it, we suffer. When we obtain it, we fear losing it. When someone hinders our desires, we become angry. When we do not understand the true nature of things, we are led by ignorance, deceiving ourselves and repeating the same mistakes over and over again. Look at yourself. How many times in your life have you been immersed in suffering because of something that did not go your way? How many times have you let anger sweep away your peace? How many times have we been fooled by illusions into thinking that happiness lies outside, forgetting that it must come from within? Understanding the cause of suffering is the first step to transformation. When we realize that suffering does not come from the outside world, but from within ourselves, we can find the path to liberation. The Buddha not only taught about suffering, but also showed us how to escape it. If suffering is an inevitable truth, and the cause of suffering lies in our own minds, is there a way to end suffering completely? The Buddha taught that there is, and that is the noble truth of cessation, the truth of liberation from suffering. The noble truth of cessation does not mean avoiding or denying the pain in life, nor does it mean completely extinguishing all emotions or desires. Instead, it is the cessation of greed, anger, and delusion, the three roots that cause suffering. When we are no longer controlled by greed, anger, or ignorance, our minds become clear and peaceful. This is the state of nirvana, an absolute stillness, undisturbed by the sufferings of the world. Nirvana is not a distant place or a mystical heaven. It can be found right here in this life, in our own hearts. When we let go of attachments and illusions, when we learn to live with understanding and compassion, we enter nirvana right here and now. But how do we reach that liberation? How do we overcome the waves of greed, anger, and delusion? The Buddha has shown us the clear path, the path that leads to the end of suffering, and that is the Noble Eightfold Path. If we understand suffering and its causes, we will see that ending suffering is not impossible. The Buddha not only taught about the nature of suffering, but he also gave us a clear path to step out of that cycle of suffering, the Noble Eightfold Path. The Noble Eightfold Path is 8 principles that guide the human mind and actions towards awakening and liberation. These are not rigid rules, but a flexible path that leads us to peace and wisdom. Right view, seeing the truth as it is, not being deluded by illusions. Right thought, keeping the mind clear, not being dominated by greed, anger, or delusion. Right speech, speaking truthfully, compassionately, not causing harm to others. Right action, acting rightly, not doing evil, not causing suffering to oneself or others. Right livelihood, living honestly, nurturing one's life with a profession that does not cause harm. Right effort, constantly striving to let go of evil and nurture good. Right mindfulness, being aware of every thought, every word, every action. Right concentration, the mind is stable, steady, and unshaken by external circumstances. The Noble Eightfold Path is not a path separate from life, but the way to live a meaningful life. When practicing this path, we not only find peace for ourselves, but also spread peace to everyone around us. Liberation is not somewhere far away, but is in every moment we live with wisdom and compassion. This is the path the Buddha took, and it is also the path for all those who want to find true peace in life. Perhaps everyone has thought that liberation is something too far away, only for monks practicing in the deep forest or in a Zen monastery. But the truth is, liberation is not a place or a mystical state. It is present in every moment of this life, in the way we think, feel, and react to everything that happens. In the modern world full of pressure, we are often caught up in endless worries. Work, money, fame, relationships. These things are not bad, but if we cling to them with greed and desire, suffering will naturally come. Liberation does not mean giving up everything to go into the deep forest, but letting go of attachments in the mind. A person who lives in the midst of life, working, loving, and enjoying every moment, but is not bound by it. That is true freedom. The Buddha taught that even in a busy life, we can still practice liberation by living mindfully, not letting our minds get caught up in negative thoughts or unnecessary worries, cultivating compassion, looking at everyone with understanding, letting go of prejudices and resentments, practicing letting go, understanding that everything is impermanent, nothing lasts forever, returning to the present, not regretting the past, not worrying about the future, but cherishing this moment. Practicing liberation is not trying to escape from life, but living fully in it, with an open heart and a clear mind. When we are no longer bound by greed and hatred, we will naturally find peace, and that is the liberation that the Buddha wants us to experience for ourselves. Liberation is not something far away or reserved for saints. The Buddha never taught us to renounce the world, but rather showed us how to live in it without being bound by it. Suffering is a part of life, but when we understand its nature, we no longer fear or avoid it. All paths to peace begin within ourselves. When we let go of illusions, reduce our attachments, and cultivate compassion, we can touch freedom wherever we are and whatever we do. It is not a mystery, but a way of life, a gentle yet profound transformation that leads us to a life of peace and meaning.